Everyone likes to debate Google Maps versus Apple Maps, but most people don't realize how deep the differences actually go. Like, for example, most people don't know that Google Maps isn't actually navigating them on the fastest route. Seriously, I'll prove it in a minute. So, for the past few weeks, I set out on a mission to dig deep into these two apps and unearth the differences in how they navigate, help you find places, book hotels, show gas prices, manage reviews, and I found some really interesting differences. For a long time, I was a hardcore Google Maps user. To be honest, I pretty much never even tried Apple Maps. But after this deep dive, I need to decide if it's maybe time to switch, or if Google Maps is better for me. Now, there's a lot to talk about in this video, so to keep things organized, I'm breaking it down into 7 categories: finding places, driving directions, audio navigation, collaboration, that's interesting, I'll explain when we get to that one, walking directions, unique device-specific features, and perhaps most importantly, the unique features and quirks of Apple Maps and Google Maps. Now, obviously this video is not sponsored. I have no affiliation whatsoever with Apple Maps or Google Maps. With that said, let's dive in. Starting off with category number 1, finding places to go. Now, when you open up both apps, they have a similar-ish layout. Google's a bit noisier with some suggestions across the top, like go home or restaurants or coffee or groceries and things like that, whereas Apple mostly just shows you the map, the weather in the top corner, and then a little search bar on the bottom. If you tap on that though, you're able to kind of see some suggestions. There's some recent places you went and some guides that Apple recommends, as well as locations you might have marked in the past. Of course, you've got home and work and stuff like that for easier navigation, whereas back to Google, on the bottom, you've got 3 tabs there. You've got Explore, you have You, and you have Contribute. I'll talk more about those later. They're not as relevant to finding new things to see, but if you swipe up for latest in your area, they show you some like hotels nearby, some restaurants, some different things people posted. And that's kind of the first main difference between these. Google Maps is much more of a review plus map platform, whereas Apple Maps is really just maps. Now, these both have Street View, and when you're navigating, you can avoid tolls and highways and things like that, but Google gets ahead right here with a few big wins. They have reviews baked in. Not only can you see a ton of reviews, in my opinion, even more reviews, and they're really easy to see on here. They show you like the stars, you can see images, you can see videos, you can check out menus. It's really well integrated, and it really fits well in this app. Whereas Apple Maps does still have reviews, but they're not native to Apple Maps. It just kind of pulls from Yelp, and sometimes they have their own thing with like a thumbs up, thumbs down percentages. Like, it's not really consistent across everything you look at. Sometimes it's the star rating from Yelp, sometimes it's like percent thumbs up and things like that. Additionally, Google has some pretty big advantages in that it shows you gas prices. Now, it's just for regular gasoline. If you use premium or diesel or whatever, then it kind of gives you a reference for which gas stations might be cheaper, but considering most people just use regular gasoline, that's a pretty big advantage there. Google is also better, especially on desktop and laptop, for booking hotels or planning travel, because not only do both platforms obviously show you hotels and ratings and stuff like that, but Google shows you the price, you can plan for how many people there are and how many nights you're staying, including which nights you're actually staying. Google also shows you, sometimes, the estimated toll price when you're going on a certain route. Both options right now, Apple Maps and Google Maps, know when it's toll versus non-toll road, but Google recently added, especially on Android, I think that's really where you mostly see it right now, probably rolling out to most iPhones soon, it'll tell you like the toll prices of different routes you might be taking. So you can say, all right, that's an extra 5 minutes, but it's going to save me $1.37 or whatever. Now, we'll unpack the maps on both these in a minute, but I have to say, looking at the actual map, Apple does a really good job of showing you a lot of restaurants and things, kind of in a slightly better way, in my opinion, whereas Google Maps feels like the road names are a lot bigger, and you can see some things that are kind of grayed out, like funeral homes and kind of random stuff. Apple seems to do a better job for me of, if you're in the area and you're like, all right, let's just find some food real quick. You find like Chick-fil-A or whatever. That's gonna show up a little bit easier, in my opinion, on Apple Maps. Apple also does have, like I said, those third-party kind of like guides, I think they call them. It'll be from like magazines and blogs and whatever. So that's kind of useful if you go somewhere. I don't really use that much, but that's a small win for Apple here. But I think kind of rounding off category number 1, I mean, Google definitely has the edge here in finding the places you wanna go. And honestly though, I've seen a lot of people that use Google Maps just to find things and then use Apple Maps to navigate. But that had me wondering, like I saw people doing that. I said, why would you not use Google Maps for that? Well, that brings us into category number 2, which is navigation while driving. Starting off with how many taps does it really take to get started driving somewhere? Honestly, it's fairly similar in both of these. You can tap on any destination you want to go to, and on Apple Maps, you just tap on the little car icon to drive, it'll show you the route, and then a third tap, you just say go, and it has you going. Google Maps has one fewer tap though, so if you tap on the location you want to go to, you could either tap on directions and see the route options, or just tap start, and it'll start navigating you right away. But this is a really big one. Remember in the beginning where I said that Google Maps doesn't always take you the fastest way? A lot of people don't realize this, but there's a default setting in Google Maps that will take you the most fuel efficient way. So sometimes it's avoiding tolls, sometimes it's saving gas, and that could be great. If you want that, you should definitely leave that enabled. But most people want to go the fastest route. I mean, honestly, look how many people speed on the highway. They're doing that because they want to get there faster. So this is an important setting. Even if you use Google Maps, it's worth knowing that this is here. So on Google Maps, just tap on anywhere you want to go, tap on directions, and then tap on the 3 dots on the top right, tap on options, and you'll see prefer fuel efficient routes. This is toggled on by default, and I've seen this cost as much as maybe 5-6 minutes, even on a short drive across town, that for some people could really be quite annoying. It adds up over time if you're doing that. Now, it is very controversial. Some people really want that, some people don't, but I think it's kind of sneaky of Google to add that in there and not make it really obvious, like not tell a lot of people that that is what they're doing. Most people assume Google Maps is taking them the fast way. Now, once you disable that, both seem to be navigating you with a really similar navigation algorithm. Both are equally as fast. I find that they take pretty much identical routes, show you identical options for alternate routes, and honestly, as far as navigating to places, they're both going to do a great job of getting you to where you need to go. But while you're going, they do a very different job of presenting information to you. So how much information is shown? Is it too much, too little? Well, you can be the judge of that. But recently, I have to say, Apple Maps has been doing a really good job of not only showing you, like Google Maps shows you the exit and like kind of what lane you want to be in, but Apple Maps shows you what the exit's actually going to look like and what your lane's going to look like when you're exiting, which I find especially helpful, especially if you're driving near larger cities where there's like many lanes on a highway and very complex exits. Apple Maps does an excellent job of that. Now, I think for navigation, Apple Maps may be slightly better, but I want to show you some things I like better about Google Maps while you're driving. One is across the top, they both show you like what your next turn is, but on Google Maps, below that, it'll say, after this, you want to do something else. So if it's like, are you going to turn left? You might want to wonder, all right, the 2 lanes are turning left. Am I going to make an immediate right after that? And I want to be in the middle lane, or do I want to be on the left lane because I'm making an immediate left after that? And Google shows you like, then turn right or then turn left. In addition, you can also swipe right and left on the top just to go through the different directions, and it'll kind of zoom in along your route and show you what that next turn is going to be. It's something that I do very often when I'm driving. On Apple Maps, you cannot do that, but you can swipe down and it shows you like what your next turns are, but it also covers the entire map when it does that. To me, Google Maps feels a little bit busier here in that they show you like a lot of very opaque blocks on there, whereas Apple Maps has a lot more kind of glassy looking things. So on the bottom, like the arrival time, the duration, that's kind of blending in with the map. So it feels like you can still see where the road's going behind that. In addition, on the top right, you've got the option to zoom out and see your entire route. If you ever wanted to do that, or you can just focus in on the next turn you're actually doing. And again, those bubbles are pretty translucent as well. We've got volume, and that's a whole different category. And of course, we have the option to report an incident. Now, these both have incidents, so you can report like police, crashes, traffic, road work, a lot of things that honestly can be big savers when you're driving. Like if there's an obstacle in the road and you know ahead of time because Google or Apple Maps tells you, that's a big positive. Now, because more people use Google Maps than Apple Maps, I find that that could be a slightly better resource. More things tend to be more reported on Google Maps compared to Apple Maps in my experience. Now, Google Maps does have this really interesting feature that I've never really used, but some people like this. So instead of always orienting the way you're driving, some people like to have north orientation, so it shows you driving like sideways. My brain doesn't work like that, but if yours does, that's something Google Maps offers that Apple Maps, at least from what I can tell, does not offer. Now, Google Maps also has the little kind of fork button, the alternate routes on the bottom. If you tap on that, that's the same thing as Apple Maps showing you the entire route, and you see the other routes in there. So if you want to avoid a certain highway, you can do that using that. Another significant difference I noticed is when you're driving, sometimes I accidentally hit the power button on my phone, and rather than having to sign back in, like on Google Maps on an iPhone, sure, it shows you like a live notification there, but I want to see the map. So I have to then like look over here and sign back in, and that's kind of a distraction if you're using your phone to navigate, whereas Apple Maps on an iPhone, you can lock the screen, wake the screen, and it just shows you the map there. Now, Google Maps does this on Android, but at least right now, Apple doesn't let it do that on iPhones. They both do a good job as well of finding traffic ahead, traffic jams, and then showing you alternate routes if you need them. And they can both show you other views. So if you want to see satellite view, there's several different ways you can look at the map, but Google Maps does have slightly more. So they've got like a terrain view on there. They can also show you, both can show you like public transit when you're trying to plan your route. They can show you like traffic map, different things, but Google does definitely have slightly, more map options when you're looking at how to view it. If you swipe up from your navigation on both of these, Spotify is integrated into Google Maps, so that's kind of nice if you're listening to music while you're driving, and maybe you don't have CarPlay, so like me, I just use my phone when I'm navigating, or maybe it's like a rental car or something and you didn't set it up yet. Like having Spotify integrated here is kind of easy, so you don't have to, toggle between two different apps. But again, swiping up, you see they both have the option to add a stop. You can share your trip progress, although it does this differently. That's more in the collaboration section of this video. I'll explain how that works when we get there. And it does some other stuff like that. Google Maps has a huge advantage, in my opinion, of showing you your speed next to the speed limit sign. So Apple Maps shows you like what the speed limit is on the road, but just kind of for me personally, seeing what my speed is as well as what the speed limit is, like seeing them side by side, you're like, oh, I'm driving too slow or I'm driving too fast. I know your car has a speedometer, but I just find myself using that really quite often. So I know I mentioned a lot of positives with Google Maps in navigation, but I think when it comes down to it, I still definitely am preferring Apple Maps because it shows you more on the screen. It looks less noisy and less cluttered. And at the same time, when you're actually getting to your exits, showing you more detail about what that ramp's going to look like, in my opinion, is a big advantage. And it's something that I would really like to see Google start to kind of copy. Moving on to category number 3, the audio navigation. So maybe you're driving and you want to hear, cues of when to turn, when to do different things. Apple has really easy access to the voice volume, so you can have different volume for your music or for navigation just by tapping on the little speaker on the right. Obviously, both Google and Apple have the option to mute it, to give you like the full unmuted or just like alerts only. But you can see volume on Apple Maps, normal, louder, or softer. So if you're listening to music and you're like, man, I wish this wasn't so loud and I could hear my music on just like background navigation, or if you want it louder, you can change that right there. Google Maps lets you do that as well, but you have to go into deeper settings. So if you tap on settings, you can then say guidance volume, softer, normal, louder. Kind of interesting to use the exact same words there. But otherwise, we've got some options with what the voices sound like. There's not a whole lot to change there. I find that they both do a decent enough job of telling you, what you want to hear. Google has a setting to give you even more detailed audio cues if you want them. But I have to say for this one, it's kind of a tie. They both sound like very natural voices, and they both do a good enough job when I'm driving of telling me where I want to go and what I want to do next. Category number 4, I've been calling this like collaboration or friends. There's kind of a lot to the maps that I think most people don't even realize exist. So for example, Apple Maps, you can share your ETA. Just with one tap, it'll send it out to your friend or whoever you want to message it to, and it'll say like, hey, I'm driving, my ETA is like 3:15, I'll let you know if anything changes. It has like a pre-written text with the time, sends it, safer than having to type it out yourself. Google Maps has a really interesting feature that is slightly different than that, in that they'll share your real-time location until you arrive. So it'll just, send it to your friend and they can see on Google Maps, as long as they also have Google Maps downloaded, they'll see like where you are, what your ETA is, and they can follow you along the route. And I think that's kind of safer. They can see if anything happens. Of course, you could also just share it on Find My, but on Google Maps here, the ability to do that across platforms, Android or iOS, and have it only for a set amount of time is kind of convenient. Google Maps also works as Find My, speaking of Find My. So if you want to have all of your friends on a map, or if you want, your parents to know where you are and they don't have iPhones, then you can't use Find My, but you can use Google Maps. You can share your location for a set amount of time or indefinitely, and that works across multiple devices, so they can see you on their desktop, on their phone, on whatever. As long as you're using Google Maps, they can see where you are for as long as you have that shared. It's also easy to save locations on Google Maps. You could do it on Apple Maps as well, but I like that it follows you across other platforms and devices. So if you have an HP laptop and you have an iPhone, then now you can use the same like map planning on both devices. You can create a whole map, save the whole route, and then just start navigating on your phone. I use this to make restaurant lists that you can easily share with friends, and you can actually make this collaborative as well. So I was planning a trip with my family to Ireland, and we had a route that we were planning. We had lists of all the restaurants and things we wanted to see, and everyone could add into that list, and it worked really well. So when we got there, whoever was driving or navigating, they could just bring up their phone, choose today's route, and it'll have all the stops pre-saved, and it's easy to navigate with that. So for collaboration, this one leans towards Google Maps. Category 5, navigation while you are walking. I like that Apple just gives you some really easy options up front. Do you want to avoid hills? Do you want to avoid busy roads? Do you want to avoid staircases? Maybe you are in a wheelchair and you don't want to get navigated into a staircase. This is something that Apple Maps has really well integrated just with the options when you're trying to navigate somewhere. And biking's the same way. You can avoid hills or busy roads. Hopefully it already avoids staircases for biking, but it's nice that that feature is baked in here. Google Maps, you can choose to avoid ferries when you're walking, and you can make it wheelchair accessible, which is going to prefer elevators and avoid stairs, but it's not gonna let you avoid busy roads. I mean, it's going to kind of already do that automatically, but it's not going to let you just avoid hills. It's something that only Apple Maps lets you do. But Google Maps has this cool 360 AR view. So, when you're in a city and you come up from a subway and you're just completely disoriented, well, on Google Maps, if you're navigating, you can just lift it up and point around, and it'll show you an augmented reality of, your camera with an arrow showing you which way you actually want to walk. It's kind of a cool feature that helps you gain your orientation. I don't use it a ton. I'd rather just look at the map and see the streets and which way they're going. But again, it's a feature that does exist on Google Maps. Also on Google Maps, when you're planning a walk, actually you can do this with planning pretty much anything, but planning a walk, if you swipe up and you look at all the turns you have to make, it'll show you the elevation throughout your route, which is convenient. So you can know hey, this is actually really steep. Even though you can't go on Apple Maps and avoid steep hills, you can swipe down then and see what each turn is going to look like, so you can kind of plan your route ahead of time. If you're going to a new city and you want to know, is this a good place to walk? You can look at your route, look at the street view at each turn and say, all right, this seems like I'll recognize this building, I'll turn right, I won't miss my turn. It's convenient that they're showing all of that right there. Again, Apple Maps shows you all the turns, but they don't have that street view baked in. Both of these do have a 360 view, as I mentioned earlier, but again, just a subtle difference in how it's presented to you. So, walking directions, this is subtle. For me personally, I'm gonna give the win to Apple Maps here just because I like the way they have this set up. I like that it gives you more options if you want to avoid hills and staircases and things like that. Just a little more flexibility in how you're walking, and same thing with cycling as well. Apple just gives you a little more flexibility in how you can plan your route, whereas Google Maps feels like driving first, but they also have walking and biking, just not as many settings on them to really tailor it to what you want for a bike ride or for a walk. Category number 6 though, the device-specific features. The first one I want to talk about is offline maps. Both of these have offline maps, but this is kind of a really subtle one. Apple lets you reshape what that offline map is going to look like what region you're saving. Google Maps makes it 9:16 phone aspect ratio. So if you want to save the entire state of Tennessee, which is really wide and skinny, you need to also get the states above and below it on Google Maps. On Apple Maps, you can save some storage by just getting Tennessee. Maybe you're just staying in the borders of a national park or something that you want to download the map in case you don't have service, but you don't want to take up all your storage downloading, an entire state above and below you. Other device-specific features or device-relevant features, Google works really well on any platform. If you have, an iPad or if you have a Windows laptop, no matter what you're using, it's very cross-platform, it's very browser accessible, and all your locations are saved with you everywhere you go on all your devices. That said, Apple Maps is also desktop available. If you have a Windows laptop, you can just go into your browser and go to maps.apple.com and you have the full experience right there. It's really convenient that you're able to do that regardless of what your device actually is. In addition to that, if you are using a MacBook or an iMac or any Mac device, there's a native desktop app for Apple Maps, which just feels nicer that you're able to use it natively on your desktop. Now, Google, not to one-up everything here, but it does have Google Earth, which is a pretty sweet platform, but I feel like that's very different from Google Maps. Not many people are using the Google Earth software to manage their maps. Most people are just going to the browser and you basically get the same experience there anyway. However, Google Maps does have a cool feature where you're able to measure distances. You can do this on your phone, you can do this on a desktop or pretty much any device. You can draw straight line distances between two things and find out what that distance is. So this is useful if you're trying to estimate I don't know, how big a certain space is, or I don't know. I use this all the time for just random stuff to measure different distances in different various locations. As far as public transit goes, these both do a good job of really understanding the routes for your local train systems. Obviously, it's going to depend on your city, where you are globally as well, but at least where I am, Apple Maps and Google Maps knows the schedule, keeps up to date with all of it, and they both seem to do a really good job. Now, so far, it's kind of been pretty tied between these two. Some things are better on Google Maps, some things are better on Apple Maps. But category 7, I hope to be the tiebreaker here. Which one is actually better based on some really interesting, unique, kind of quirky features that one or the other has. And this is something that, I mean, depending on what your needs are, these might be a real deal breaker for you. Or maybe they're just convinced to use the other one. So starting off with something small, Google Maps lets you change your driving avatar. Kind of fun. You could change it to a different colored car or a little triangle or whatever color you want. There's different options to make it feel a little bit more personal, kind of like the old Garmin like GPSs that we used to have in like 2007 or whatever. I don't know. I feel like I was a kid navigating around with my parents, and it was always like you'd play, you'd make it like a beach ball or something. Google Maps kind of has that same vibe. As I mentioned before, Google Maps also has a pretty good integration with Spotify. If you're listening to that, there's other music services you can set up in settings as well, but for me, Spotify, nice integration there. Apple Maps ties in really well with the rest of the Apple ecosystem now. So anything you talk about in iMessage or on Safari, it kind of ties together really well with Apple Maps, and they kind of give you that whole ecosystem feel where everything's just a little more convenient to get to when you're using your phone. Apple Maps also lets you create a custom route. So if you tap and hold on a pin, you get some options there. One of them is create a custom route, so you can keep tapping on more pins and build a route. You could do this maybe if you're planning a run, for example. You can make it out and back. You can make it round trip. It'll tell you some information about that. It's fairly similar to what I was saying about Google's measure distance feature, but it's not going to use straight lines. It's going to use the roads and kind of build a navigation between points. And it's kind of cool that you can do that. Google Maps, however, and this is a big one I haven't mentioned yet, Google Maps seems to be a little bit ahead of Apple Maps in other countries around the world. I'm here in the United States, and I know some other countries work very similar to this, like Apple Maps is, neck and neck with Google, but I also know there are a lot of countries around the world, based on what I've seen online, also based on my own experience traveling, that Google Maps is just a little bit ahead of Apple Maps. Google Maps, though, this is a big negative, very, very big negative, in my opinion. Google Maps has ads, like a lot of ads. It's a free platform, so it's no surprise, but Apple Maps doesn't seem to do that yet. They don't have ads littered throughout the entire UI. But in Google, you can see them in search results. So if you search for restaurants or lawyers or bank or whatever, you'll see the first couple of results, which kind of take up the whole first, like almost your entire screen. They're ads. It says sponsored on the top. So you have to scroll past them, and then you get to the results you actually want. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Like I said, it's a free platform, but I would say it's a good thing that you can use Apple Maps and not have to scroll past the ads. That's certainly a positive. You can also notice on Google Maps, and this is really subtle, most people don't even realize this is a thing. Anytime you see a square icon on the map, that's an ad. So when you're zooming in, looking around, you see Dunkin' Donuts, you see Capital One, you see these different things that you're like, wait a minute, why is their logo there and it has a little caption below that? If you tap on it, you'll realize it's an ad. It's sponsored. Google Maps shows you that even when you're driving. It'll say like Verizon, save 50% this month. And it's like passing you as your little car drives by it. So there are ads baked into Google Maps. Again, not hating on Google Maps, but leave a comment if you knew about the square thing. Also, both of these interestingly show you the weather of different locations. They do it differently. Like Apple shows you much more often. It's more prominent in the top left, whereas Google doesn't usually show you that. Sometimes it does if you're zooming into a new city, and you can tap on that on Google. You can't tap on it on Apple, but on Google it'll show you like the forecast and the hourly weather in that region. And a big one, this is a really big positive for Google, maybe, unless you don't like it. Apple Maps has something kind of similar, like Apple Maps will remember some of your locations, but Google Maps has Google Timeline. So if you're ever wondering like, all right, where is my friend's house? Like I know I went there last Thanksgiving, I don't know what their address is, I'm embarrassed to ask for their address. You can go on Google Timeline, go back to the day, last Thanksgiving, it'll show you everywhere you went on that day, and you can see the address you went to, and honestly, I've done that a lot to find friends' houses that I went to in the past. Similarly, if you ever, get like subpoenaed or you're in court, like someone turns a light on you and like, where were you on the night of June 7th? And you're like, I don't know. Well, if you have Google Maps, you can go on Google Timeline and find out exactly what you did on that day. Like I went for a walk, I drove to my parents' house, we went out to dinner. You can see all that. And that's on by default. So some people might find that creepy. You can go in and delete all that if you don't want it there. Other people find it very useful and maybe didn't even realize it existed. Another positive with Apple Maps, if you use an Apple Watch, it does have better map integration with Apple Maps. So a little vibration on your wrist lets you know when you're turning. And I feel like that's a big positive, especially if you're biking or just like walking around a city, just glancing at your watch. It's a little easier than always taking out your phone to navigate. So those are some interesting differences. There's so many more differences between these platforms, but which one is actually the best? Well, I'm glad you asked. It's really a cat and mouse game in my opinion. They're both evolving to kind of match and one-up one another in different sections, different regions. I've been a hardcore Google Maps user for a while, but it depends on what you need. Google Maps may have better police or road obstacle detection. Apple Maps has a cleaner navigation UI with honestly superior graphics in my opinion. Google has a powerful suite of software, including a smarter voice assistant, a massive library of reviews, and a lot of other features baked in. So for me, when I'm planning to go somewhere, or if I'm in another country, I'm definitely going to be using Google Maps. But if I'm navigating somewhere nearby and I just want to get there quickly and have a clean UI, Apple Maps does a really good job. So leave a comment and let me know which one you like better. Also, shout out to Josh Chang. He made a video on this topic about a year ago, talks more about the UI than I did in this video. So check out his video after this one. It inspired me to make this video, and honestly, it inspired me to give Apple Maps a chance. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.